Hi everyone, Joshua Hanlon here. Today I'm in Buffalo, New York at the Buffalo Naval Park, and I'm joined by Shane, the Director of Collections, and we are on top of the USS Croaker submarine here. So you've got a couple of other larger ships that we can see in the background, but this is your submarine, so tell us about the history of this and how this ended up here.
Yeah, USS Croaker is a pretty unique ship in terms of what you can visit today. USS Croaker is a Gato-class submarine, constructed and put into service in 1944, and she sank 11 Japanese vessels during her time in the Pacific. As with all of our vessels, she went through a conversion for the Cold War and now the Soviet Union threat. So if you visit a Gato-class in Cleveland or Cobia in Wisconsin, or some of the others, the Bowfin in Hawaii, you'll say, he doesn't look like this. Well, that's because she did go through what's called a hunter-killer Type 2 conversion. And that changed her mission platform for the Cold War. So in World War II, sinks 11 Japanese vessels, comes back victorious, is then put in mothballs until about 1953, when she gets converted into what you see today. And her platform now was to silently track the Soviet Union sub-threat and merchant and capital ships as well. So the Soviet Union went through, we predicted, a very large Soviet submarine building program. It never really came to fruition, but we knew that we would not be able to match that. So they converted old Gato-classes into these hunter-killers with guppy technology to quiet the boat and to make it more efficient. So certainly the gun platforms go away, the 4-inch gun goes away, the 20-millimeter Oerlikons. It's now an enclosed lookout bridge here, streamlined sail. They add a snorkel, which we did not have in World War II, so they would potentially be able to run the diesels underwater. And one of the most important things is they move the sonar from down below to the bow. And so she doesn't have that slick blade that you'd see on other submarines. She has a much more bulbous transducer system, the BQR4 system, on the bow. And so the sonar isn't coming from underneath the submarine like it would have done in World War II. It's right at the bow, just shooting out, and then they're reading what is going on. So one of her duties was to kind of park herself in the North Atlantic in the Red Route 1, coming from, in between Iceland and Greenland, and about 150 feet below the surface, just go silent and just listen to all the traffic and to index it for Naval Command. So again, changing from we are attacking Japanese merchant fleet and sinking them to we are now watching, monitoring, tracking, and potentially targeting if needed.
So how many years did serve during the Cold War before it was retired?
Sure. So she served from 53 up until about 1968. About 2 years before 1968, so from 66 to 68, she became a trainer for officers, a pierside trainer. So they parked her in Groton, Connecticut, right next to the Electric Boat Company where she was constructed in the 40s, and guys would come aboard and they would train on her without actually going out into the Thames River or into the ocean. And they would get the feel for the submarine. So they did that with enlisteds and officers as well. So she became a pierside trainer for the last couple of years. So her main duties with the Sixth Fleet, the Second Fleet, and NATO exercises ended around 1965, but she was still being in use to the U.S. Navy until '68.
And that's something that's so fascinating about the whole collection here at the Buffalo Naval Park for anyone who can come and visit, is that really all of your museum ships kind of span that time gap from World War II into the Cold War. And so you get to see kind of that technological evolution in all sorts of different ways between the three different ships.
And I think that is one of our strengths, is that we can talk about our World War II histories, but also take a look at the changes that happened in the Cold War. The technological changes, the weapons platforms, the mission platforms, all evolve and change over time, which is really fascinating, and we can do that with all three of our vessels.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we can take a closer look here at the submarine then.
Let's head down. Watch your heads. So the tour starts from the main deck and leads us down right into the forward torpedo space. This forward torpedo room would have held, at the time in World War II, 16 torpedoes, and about 15 crew would have lived here.
So that's why it feels so open right now.
Yes,
You don't have...
right. We don't have all of that. We don't have all of that set up. One of the changes by bringing the BQR-4 to the bow was they had to remove the torpedo tubes number 1 and number 2, right? Because now the torpedoes would go right into the sonar array. So we only have 4 now, and then 4 in the aft, the aft torpedo room that we'll see as well. But they would have had, in World War II, the uppers would have been there, 1 and 2, right, where those greenish mounts are. And they would have had all torpedo tubes in there. And then they would have had 10 arrayed down below the decks and up along the sides here. And then again, we show it a little bit here of what life would have been like in between the torpedoes, all right, for the 15 crew that would live and work in here. We do have some nice models. This is the original Croaker, as you see if you go see an original Gato-class. That's what she looked like. And then, of course, during her conversion.
You can see, you mentioned earlier, one of the big striking differences is the removal of those guns off the top.
Yes.
That kind of give that very World War II feel that a lot of people associate with
Yes,
that.
and the open bridge
Yes.
and all of that, and now to the sleeker subsail that we have. Because again, like on the USS the Sullivans, they went from a pole mast to a tripod mast. And they needed to do that because they had larger radar systems, and the pole mast wouldn't be able to hold it. Well, same with the same sort of idea with this larger subsail. They used more technology that this subsail would not have been able to manage and to stow appropriately.
We got an example of one. Is this one of the torpedoes here?
This is an example of one. This is an example of a Mark 14. So Mark 14s were the standard, even though they were not very good, in the beginning of World War II. Then they came out with the Mark 18s, which were a little bit better, but the same 21-inch diameter, things like that. And then towards the end of her existence, she was able to use more modified torpedoes. So this area here on a traditional Gato would have the sonar arrays, all right? And they're periscopic, if that's the word. They would drop down like a periscope through the bottom of the keel, and they were like the flashlight sonars. So it would look at about a 15-degree sweep, then have to go to the next 15 degrees, next 15. So you weren't getting even a 90-degree or 180-degree view. They're only getting what you're looking at that moment. And that's why they call it a flashlight. Like if you take a flashlight, you're only seeing what's
It had to sort of pan around.
Yes, you had to pan around all the time. And so the transducer, the BQR-4, changed all of that. And they had a wide sweep. You just couldn't use this technology here. So the hydrophone equipment is still here. And this would have been for the sonar guys stationed here. Now they built a specific sonar room down below when they changed it in 1953 to manage the more equipment. So watch your heads and chins, and we're going into officers' country. First things you'll see is the little tiny pantry and the shower.
All very small, very tiny. So was the actual size of the submarine did not really change? It was just the technology and the spaces inside.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And so this was the last of what they call the last of the thin skin boats. If you've gone to the COD, which you said you have, you probably talked to Paul. Paul Ferrace is a great guy, and he knows that sub in and out. He spent 45 years studying that one sub. So again, multi-ship versus one ship. And he always would come to me and say, hey, oh, it's Shane, the last of the thin-skin Gatos. And I say, what is he talking about, right? Because I didn't understand it. So the Gato classes were about 5/8 of an inch on the pressure hull, right? And while the Croaker is 246, Gato numbers went up to like 287 or 288, and then even into the 300s. We literally were the last commissioned Gato in World War II. So even though our numbers smack dab right in the middle, because of the way they would just assign numbers to various shipyards, right? You're doing 230 to 240, you're doing 240 to 247, right? Their construction was at all different times. So he would always flummox me with that. Oh, you're the last of those thin skins. So when they went to the Buffalo-class, that was 7/8 of an inch pressure hull, which allowed them to go about 100 feet deeper. And we would stay at, if we needed to, we can go down to about 350 feet. Some Gatos pushed 400, 500 feet if they really needed to, but you wouldn't want to do that for long. So we're the last commissioned of the thin skins. So you have the wardroom here where they would have war planning, officers would eat, some of their bunks.
What's this photo here? Is that ice on the submarine there?
Yes. That's not the Croaker, but yeah, they're probably in the North Atlantic or the Bering Sea there.
Just gives you an idea of some of the conditions, I guess, that these submarines would have gone through.
Absolutely. So that's a Buffalo-class.
Okay.
So again, the one after the Gato, which is what the Croaker is. You have the captain's or CO's stateroom here, more staterooms for officers, and this is where the CPOs would live. All right, so the chief petty officers, again, E7s, E8s, they've been in the Navy for 18 to 25 years. They're experienced technical guys. All right, they may not have had the college education, but they have the experience of how to run the machinery. All right, and so they would be the go-betweens between the lower enlisted and the officers. Now you have the ship's, the yeoman shack or the ship's office. So now we are in kind of like the brain center, all right? You can call the brain center a little bit up there as well, in where what you would call like the conning tower, which is where the captain would be. The XO would be down here, or the chief of the boat would be down here barking out orders. But here you had the diving planes, all right? So you have the forward diving planes, the aft diving planes, and these are the planes that would come out and extend and go like that to make the boat go down or up. All right, so you had to make sure, there's a reason why they're sitting right next to each other, all right? Because you'd have two guys stationed here. Because you want to come down on an even keel as you're diving or surfacing, right? You don't want to be coming up all wobbly.
Exactly.
Right, so they have to be in constant communication. The ship's wheel, which would control the rudder, left and right, is actually up top, but they had an emergency wheel. If you can believe it, this little tiny wheel here was the emergency rudder for the Croaker.
Wow.
Right? On some of them, they're a little bit larger, but this is what we had. So, and of course, navigation here, the dead reckoning table, where they would be able to chart threats, friendlies and foes. These would be to close all of the manifolds manually. You also can do it through here, and then this would show and indicate what is open and what is closed before you dove. And so they were red and green, so it's kind of called the Christmas tree, they would call it, all right, because it would turn from red to green. And if you needed to do it manually, you would be able to do it here. So it's interesting that the controls for the hydraulics are all different shapes. right? Because sometimes you have to do this in the dark, so you'd have to know which one you're grabbing.
So this area is always kind of the iconic space in every submarine movie where like everything goes wrong and they're
down.
Do you have any particular favorite like World War II or submarine movies or things that you feel like kind of represent a submarine like this well? Is there anything that comes to mind?
There's very good. I love the Bedford incident, which is a Cold War movie where a destroyer is tracking a Russian sub, or a Soviet Union sub, I should be saying, not Russian. I'm sorry. But that's a great movie. Of course, Das Boot is great. I've never seen Down Periscope, but people love it. So, but yes, we can get to red lights here. Maybe. There we go. All right, this is the iconic
Now it's ready to start,
yes,
filming a movie
right,
in here.
Absolutely. And the red lights were for the lookouts. All right, so they kind of always seem to be on in movies, things like that. Well, you only need it for the lookouts because this light will have your eyes, when you get out into pitch black, your eyes are already adjusted. The captain doesn't, the steering guys don't need to be doing that, but yeah, it's for show, things like that. But when you would go outside, if you were just going from regular white light outside, it takes time for your eyes to adjust. That could be a kill shot, right, in 30 seconds or a minute. So these would allow you to go outside and your eyes are already adjusted to black. If you couldn't, if the captain didn't want this, or the chief of the boat, they gave you goggles with red lenses, and you'd wear those for about 15 minutes before you went outside. I'll leave it like this. I like that.
Yeah.
But over here, you've got the electrical switchboard to transfer electrical power between compartments. And of course, here is all the manifolds to bring in seawater, open up the ballast tanks, or to then shoot out. You have air compression systems, which blows the water out, and then you rise. All right, so all of that is controlled here. And yes, this is how it would look in service. Each one of these didn't have their own handle. They had one or two handles that you would just slam on their turn, move it, slam on their turn, and turn. So sometimes people ask us, like, where are all the handles to the valves? Well, they would have only had one or two that they would have used.
Yeah, sort of a modular type system where you can just stick it on there. Yeah, interesting.
Stick it on there. Okay, we're heading aft now through the command and control areas.
You've got some nice background sounds going on here.
We have the radio room here, all right, for the radio space. And then this leads into the galley, which you can see right there. We're having some work done. You can see down there and there, we're getting ready again for going to dry dock, things like that. But then the guys would eat here. So unlike a surface vessel like the Sullivans or the Little Rock that we have on display here, these guys would only get about 15 minutes to eat, but usually they would get the best cooks in the Navy. All right, so you're sacrificing a lot by being here. So they would usually recruit the best. Each submarine would get like the best chef.
So your food would be better to try to make up.
Yes, to try and make it up. Is it really better? It all tastes like diesel and oil and things like that anyway. Also, instead of having breakfast, lunch, dinner, mid-rats or midnight rations, he would be preparing food 24/7. So you could always have a second, you're getting 15 minutes, maybe you don't get to eat. All right, so you could have another meal as when you get off of duty station, things like that. Down below here was the cold storage or reefers. They also had a small arms locker, which is down there. And this, again, was a battle dressing station as well. All right, so if someone had a severe wound, they could bring them in here, lie them on the tables, just like the wardroom, all right, and in the officer's country, and they could do some repairs. Right? You had a corpsman here, but on a surface vessel like the Sullivans or Little Rock, you would have like a medical doctor. Here you just had a very skilled chief petty officer, senior chief petty officer, corpsman. So again, they're learning the technical skills of medical knowledge, and they've been in the Navy for 18 to 27 years or so. But you're not being overseen by an MD in any way.
Right.
just don't have the space for that.
Now, did these submarines operate with other ships like the Sullivan's destroyers and things like that, or were they more out on their own? What during World War II, for like when it was sinking the Japanese ships? What was that like?
Yeah, that's a great question. These were called fleet boats, right? Because they could keep up with the fleet. So, they would be sent. We didn't have the Wolfpack system like Germany had, but they would have a small, they would be like a small cub, like a cub tribe or something, right? Yeah. So we have evidence in World War II that the Croaker would have worked with, say, 2 other submarines, and they would coordinate and triangulate. They would go into different areas of a area of threat or a theater, and one would kind of monitor if there was a convoy coming. They would kind of monitor, get the ranges, get the distance between each ship, and then the other 2 could attack. Sometimes they would go out, but they wouldn't coordinate as much. So they would be on the same patrol in the same area, but they wouldn't be communicating because they need radio silence or something like that. So, but a lot of times she just would go out on her own. And towards the end of her World War II experience, you might hear references to lifeguard duty. Well, we had decimated Japanese merchant fleets, so by 1945 there wasn't much to target anymore, and the Americans were getting closer to the home islands, which meant that they were able to do direct bombing and things. So they would be parked in an area for 2 weeks. They would be told when bombing runs are being made, or fighter runs are being made, and then they would just kind of park themselves there. And if a bomber had to ditch or a plane had to ditch in the water, we were right there to pick the individual up, any survivors up, I should say. So that certainly her last war patrol was just strictly lifeguard duty, and she didn't have anything to do. So the planes were flying overhead, but none of them were shot down or had, faults to where they'd have to land in the water.
So you mentioned the German U-boats there, obviously very famous, something that like the public is generally very familiar with. So were there kind of significant differences between like American and German submarine design or philosophy? Like if you're going through this submarine versus a German U-boat, are there big significant differences that someone might notice, or the ways that they approach their submarines?
Yes, and I'm not an expert on U-boats.
Sure, yeah.
But I have visited the U-505 in Chicago. Mm-hmm. One of the things you notice right away is the size difference. I believe ours were much larger than theirs, if I'm getting that right, if I'm going back in my brain. The biggest difference would be the propulsion systems, I think. They were able to run their diesels underwater because they had a snorkel system. Fleet boats, like Gatos and the later class of Baleos, it was like a hybrid car. All right, we ran on diesels on the surface. Then when we wanted to submerge, we had to run on battery. So we shut the diesels off, turned on the batteries. We had 2 batteries with 126 cells each. So the aft battery space was right here. The forward battery space was in officer's country. And so down below, there are 126 one-ton acid-lead batteries that are about this tall.
Wow.
And they would be positioned along the center line and then up and up and up towards the sides. And you would need to have someone putting distilled water in them every day and things like that. So pretty complex. So the snorkel is able to vent exhaust, bring air intake. We couldn't do that. So we would run on the battery like a phone or a computer. It runs down depending on how much you're using it. So they would get at most about 20 hours, 24 hours underwater, and that's it. Then they would have to come back up. You turn the diesels on, and then you can shunt power from the diesels, electric power, to recharge the battery cells. And then that was the beauty of our design, is we had 4 engines at the time. So you can dedicate 2 engines to battery charging, 2 engines to propulsion, and then the rest of energizing the boat. Or you can do 3 in 1 or 1 in 3, right? So that gave you options, especially under duress. If you needed to get out of a place pretty quickly, you can throw extra juice where you needed it because you had those extra diesels. Right, and they were big diesels, as you'll see as we go through. They were 16 cylinders, right out of locomotives, you know, the electric train that was growing at the time too here in America. So that, to me, would be the biggest difference.
So would this sub in Japanese waters have ever encountered other Japanese subs, or was it mostly surface level shipping and ships that it was hunting down?
Yes, to my knowledge, reading through the war diaries, it was just shipping. She was with a submarine, an American submarine, the Escalar, that was hit by a mine and sank, and they were able to hear that through their radio and their sonar, at going down and imploding and crumbling. So that's a poignant story in the Croaker. More lighthearted, their first kill was actually a whale. They left Pearl Harbor for the first time and they struck a whale. I don't know how they did it. And, you know, of course it hits the bow and then it hits the propellers and they were like, what was that? They all ran up to the top and there's this poor whale kind of in the death throes of. It was bad. So I would actually, on our battle flag, I'd like to get a whale painted. Right?
Very appropriate.
Yeah, very appropriate. But other than that, she had a really seasoned commanding officer, which must have gave great strength to the crew. Because most of the crew is green, except for the CPOs. The commanding officer served aboard a prior Gato-class, and he had 8 or 9 war patrols, was awarded a Navy Cross by the time he came on board the boat. So he must have instilled great confidence in a green crew. And he was the commanding officer for the first 2 war patrols when they sank 8 Japanese vessels, I think.
How big was the crew in total?
Yeah, good question. For this crew, it was about, in World War II, they would have anywhere from about 70 to 80 guys, maybe 8 to 10 officers, 4 or 5 CPOs, and then the rest enlisted. During Cold War period, they would have anywhere about 60 or so that they could get away with. But again, the sacrifice of this life, right? You're not, and that's one of the things I try to teach people when they come aboard is this isn't Hunt for Red October, right? You're not down for months and months. You have to come up at a certain time, especially in World War II. And that was one of the things that we did against the Japanese and the Japanese tried against us, is if they identified us, you just track them and they can't surface, and eventually their battery will just die and they'll sink. So that was a strategy that we would use against Japan and Japan would use against us, is that once you identified one, keep them from surfacing and turning on the diesels to keep from recharging the batteries. Very interesting stuff.
Right, the limits of the technology then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this space is, you can see, is going through a conversion right now. This is the primary berthing space aboard the Croaker and other Gatos. There would have been 36 bunks in here, 4 rows, all right, if you can believe it, and 9 bunks in each row. So when it's fully loaded, you would come through here and you almost have to walk sideways, right, to get through, because there's bunks here and there's bunks here.
Yeah.
And then you can go into the interior and then again into the interior. So we are bringing a lot of bunks back to try and make it more. We had 3 in here at one time, but we want to now make it so it gives a more authentic feel to it. Behind us was our locker, our medical locker. All right, so that was it. There was no sick bay on board. The corpsman came to the locker, got what you needed, and you would go back to your bunk.
Are those bunks that you're putting in here something you already have on hand, or you're trying to track those down and as you can collect them?
We do have them.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. So we have got them from another vessel, all right, but so they're in storage right now, and then when we begin to bring this space back, then we're gonna, it will be, it'll have a much more authentic feel.
Sure, yeah. This is the most open feeling I've ever had on a
Yes.
World War II submarine.
Right, and that will not be for long, right? Yes, but that was the way down to the battery, and then down below were the 126 batteries. We actually have a picture of one, the replica, the USS Cod replicated one. And so again, you can see the height of it. It's right at the gentleman's midsection there. And then 256 of them would be on, or 252 of them would be on board, each weighing 1 ton each.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So a lot of people ask about hot racking, things like that. What does that mean? So usually that meant that there were 3 people to 2 beds. So you kind of had that rotation of 3 guys were sleeping in 2 beds. So one guy's out, one guy's in, another guy's in, then you kind of rotate that way. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't like 1 guy or 2 guys per 1 bunk, but there would be time where there would be a bunk not being used. But that's why it's hot racking, right? You're getting out, another guy's getting in, and the sheets are still warm from when you were in it.
Exactly.
Right. Not fun.
When you have this limited space, yeah.
So this was the main enlisted head. You'll see they had a little shower. They also would have had a washing machine in here, and then the 2 toilets right behind the camera there.
Gets a lot lower here.
It does. Yeah, watch your heads. So this was the forward engine room, which would have had in World War II 2 engines. One of the things they did was to remove this engine here, and they incorporated now more equipment for the sonar here. And actually then this would have been the space for the lathe. So to make any metal repair, they would have had a lathe here to do that work and repair it in situ rather than having to send it off or talk to a tender or a repair ship. I don't know where the lathe went. It was gone by the time I started here, so who knows. All right, but this is an example of the 16-cylinder electric diesel engines that would have come out of trains. All right, and we have them in different states. Now, some submarines actually turn one of their diesels on. I'm quite jealous. But we don't have that. And again, one boat, multi-boat, that's one of those differences that they can put all of their resources and energy into their one boat. But I have been on the Cobia when he did start it up, and it's, again, one of those experiences you have to experience, right? You can't describe it.
I imagine the noise was
yes,
insane.
It's insane, but the amount of airflow that you get coming through this space was just, all of a sudden my shirt's flapping, and it's hot down here.
Yeah.
But you're getting a lot of airflow, and that's just from one engine. So it's a unique experience. So down below are the guys working, so how this would connect to, and we'll see that a little more aft, is these, during World War II, as with all the propulsions on these vessels, was turbines, right? And then that connects to a reduction gear, right, which then slows the rate of motor rotation down to a more manageable RPMs. One of the things to help quiet the boat in 1953 was that they put on a slower motor and removed the reduction gears completely. So the boat in World War II, we're going to go 22 miles on the surface, 9 miles an hour below surface. It then topped out at about 17 on the surface with those slower rotating motors that they put on. The reduction gears are probably, if the engines aren't loud enough, the reduction gears are really loud as well. They give this really high whirling, zzz, right? And they wanted to quiet that down, so they just got rid of them during the hunter-killer conversion. And so at the time in 53, these and her 6 sisters that were converted were the quietest submarines in the U.S. Navy at the time.
So it was only 6 of them total from the old like World War II fleet that got converted over?
Into the hunter-killer conversion,
Okay.
yes. There is one on display now, and I need to get down there to Texas, the USS Cavala, which is 244. So 244 is USS Cavala on display in Texas. 245 is USS Cobia, and 246 is here in Buffalo.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
So we have the 3 in line, all built right next to each other at the Electric Boat Company. And 2 of the 3 are now hunter-killers. So you'll see one partially put together, one mostly put together. Again, the guts aren't in them, all right, but this gives you an idea of what they look like. And so you would control the RPMs with this lever, all right, and you actually had a foot pedal that you might not be able to see down there. You set the RPMs, you click the foot pedal, that locks the throttle into place, and now you're going at a set RPM level. So this tight area that you'll see is the maneuvering space and where all of the electric was housed, all of the electricity on board.
We moved through sideways there.
Yes. So you had the maneuvering space here. You have the gears to go ahead, stop, astern for the port side and the starboard side prop. And then what you had was you had connected to generators, right? The 2 batteries had 4 generators. So you would be able to take power using these levers from different generators, right? Generator 1, 2, 3, or 4. You get the amps and the voltage, and you can transfer them throughout the whole ship based on the needs. All right, you also had a bus tie that you would be able to connect the battery to each other or to keep them separate. And all of that work was done here. So you'll see we have the radar repeaters, but they're back here because this is where the captain would say, we want to go this speed. We want to go this knottage or rotations per minute. And again, just, the USS Little Rock has this, the USS The Sullivans. The bell rings, they mimic it here and then push the bell, and then that goes back to the conning tower and say, we are acknowledging that speed.
So that system was kind of universal through a lot of these ships at the time.
It was the best way of communicating, right? And even you watch movies like Titanic and things like that, you see them slamming things all ahead full, all ahead back. That just was the technology at the time. So this was kind of like the electrical center, controlling the motors, controlling, at the time, the reduction gears, and the engines, and then transferring all of that electricity throughout the system. And where are you drawing it from? So, and right here, we'll go through to the aft torpedo room.
So when the submarine was hunting for enemy ships, was it primarily using like periscope? It would surface and it would look for a ship, or it got information from other allied ships? How did it kind of find the ships that it was trying to hunt down?
That's a good question, Joshua, and it's a variety of different ways. So yes, they would get contacted, as I mentioned earlier. They might go out in a cub pack of 3 or so. They would be in communication if they were able to say, oh, we're leaving this area, but we did see a convoy at this heading, right? And so that would prompt the Croaker or another vessel, another boat to go to that area. Certainly sonar, they were using sonar. They did have radar for air threats, things like that, and to see surface vessels as well. So you can use the sonar. So they would be able to track through a variety of different ways. All of her sinkings, though, all 11 vessels were the torpedoes were shot from the surface.
Oh.
So they never had an underwater shot. They may have, but they weren't successful. Again, this technology, they had to get it out there, right? And it may not have been the best technology. And again, with the Mark 14s, the firing pin would snap, and it wouldn't then detonate the explosion. It would break. And so there was, through 42 and 41, 42, into early 43, the captains were going back to America and saying, these don't work. So they had contact detonators, and they also had magnetic detonators, which meant it would be able to run deeper. And once it got the magnetized signal from the bottom of the ship, it would then explode underneath the ship without actually, and those would be faulty as well. It would just run right under all the ships and just not explode. So when they developed the Mark 18s, things became a little bit better, and because we were so late into service, as the last Gato-class, right, we used the Mark 14 pretty exclusively. From my reading, right, then I'll talk to someone and say, no, you had Mark 14s, right? So it's murky.
Yes.
Right? But all of our sinkings were from the surface at night.
And was it like shipment, like commerce vessels, or was it like Japanese military vessels that it was sinking, or mixture?
Well, we have a replica of the ship's flag here, right? We do actually have a copy of one of the original flags. I'm sorry, not a copy. We have one of the original ship's flags because each of the crew got one at the end of World War II.
Oh, neat.
And so what we're seeing here is you're seeing the traditional Japanese flag, right? But then you're also seeing the rising sun as well. So the traditional Japanese flag that we know today were the merchant vessels. These, with the rising sun and the rays, were military vessels. Now, they weren't sinking battleships or anything like that. They would take out smaller capital military craft. The most famous one is the Imperial Japanese Navy's Nagara, which was a cruiser, famous cruiser, and it was the first of the class, so they built the Nagara-class after that ship. And that was her first sinking, and probably her most notable. She sank troop transports, oilers. What you see here are these two pennants, and people will ask what those are. And those are sampans. Those are junk vessels that are getting a little too close to your boat, right? So if you see the traditional pictures of the small sailing barges in like Tokyo Harbor, yes, with that unique sail, those are what I'm meaning. But there would be soldiers on board, and even today, right, they pull up on a little dinghy, maybe attach a bomb. So they were like, you're getting a little too close to us, we're just going to take you out. So those were taken out with the deck guns. You'll also see that there's two flags that with the line through them. Again, murky waters of World War II and the record keeping. So the crew and the commanding officers do say that the Croaker sank 2 more vessels, but they are officially not included in her war kills. So they put them up there, but then they drew that line through them. And the way they did that was after the war, U.S. captured all of the Japanese shipping records. And so they would mark when a ship was lost. And then they would go to the American records and see, was there a submarine around that area when that ship sank? If they can verify that it wasn't from a capital ship or a battleship or a cruiser. So that's how they kind of confirmed these kills, was to say, aha, yes, the IGN Nagara was in this area, the Croaker was in this area. At the same time, the Croaker probably sank it, because no other submarines were there at the time. So the crew claims 2 more sinkings, and it goes unverified in the records. So they say, oh, that was sank on, January 6th of 1945. Well, they go into the records, there's no ship that sank in January 6, 1945. So that caused some problems with the crew, of course, because they want their battle flag to be 13, not 11. But you see this throughout U.S. Navy U.S. submarines, right? Oh, we sank 75,000 tons of shipping when it really only turns out to be 30,000 tons of shipping. But there is something to that because, you're looking at something, 4,000 yards away and you're trying to gauge how big it is, right? What is the tonnage? What is, you might say something's 10,000 when it really is 5,000, right? Mm-hmm. And you just don't know because you're keeping distance. And then you're setting the torpedo data computer and away they go and you hope you hit. But the Nagara was the most well-known of the Croaker sinkings.
So going into the Cold War era service then, did it ever have any close encounters with any Soviet submarines, or was it really just kind of out there scouting and reporting back kind of information back to the U.S.?
So in our collections, some of that time period is a little murky. I don't have great records from that time. That just means I haven't gotten to the National Archives yet to get those records.
Sure.
But based on what I do have, it doesn't seem as though there are really any close calls with Croaker during the Cold War. Tracking in the North Atlantic, tracking in the Mediterranean, because these fleets were right next to each other, right? And there's film out there on YouTube and elsewhere where it shows there's a cameraman on a USS ship, and 500 yards away is a Russian cruiser, and they're just steaming alongside each other, harassing each other.
Yeah.
And of course the bombers, the Tupolev bombers or whatever, would breeze by things. So it was close quarters it's sometimes. But yeah, just tracking and identifying and notifying the brass and the upper chains of command as to what was coming out of the inlets in the North Atlantic or what was in the Mediterranean. So, but by 1959, a good way of talking about the life of the Croaker is by 1959, she was removed out of her hunter-killer configuration. Not configuration, but status, let's say. And she went back to being a regular SS instead of an SSK. Because by that time, Soviet technology and even American technology had bypassed what they did in 1953. So she was an SSK for only about 6 years of her existence, from 53 to 59. After that, she went back to regular fleet boat duties of just steaming with the fleet, protecting the fleet, and of course still being lookout and picket stations and things like that, but not doing that sit and watch, because they would have seen us before we would have seen them with the growth of technology.
Mm-hmm. Another interesting point to talk about here is, as we said, you've got several ships in the collection. This is your submarine. You've got 2 other surface vessels. So what are some of the challenges and some of the differences in kind of how you preserve a submarine versus the surface vessels, and what do you have to do to keep the submarine in shape?
Sure, yeah. So there's a lot of ways that water can incur. Thankfully, the pressure hull, which is where we are in right now, is very stable. What happens is on the ballast tanks, or what we call the saddlebags outside, those can have a lot of corrosion. So we might have a fuel oil tank that has some oil in it that has water incursion in it. Or a ballast tank that's now completely dry and empty, gets a hole and has water incursion. So we don't see, there might be some leaking and stuff occasionally on a bad day. We might have some drips, that come from the outside, and some of the venting and some of the induction valves and things. But on the interior here, she's pretty clean. It's the saddlebag area, the ballast tanks and fuel oil tanks on the outside that are a problem. So preserving her it's a little harder to get to some of the areas, right? Because again, there's a deck below. It's not the main deck, and it's not almost full even standing. But we have to go through the pump rooms and the sonar areas and things like that to make sure that there's no water incursion. Mm-hmm. But other than that, it's just trying to tell the story. And I think because this is such an enclosed space, that having it as much authentic as possible is better than, say, for the USS Little Rock, where you can have exhibits and, you know, things unrelated to the Little Rock. But here, everything has to be related to the Croaker.
Yeah.
Right.
I see the painted torpedo here. So was that something that actually would have been painted like that in wartime, or is this more of just like an after-war?
Yeah, it's an aftermarket. They may have put messages and things like that, as you see in photographs.
Yeah.
But to actually spend the time, potentially, certainly, potentially. And then we have, again, the aft torpedo tubes, the 4 torpedo tubes here leading aft. So after 53, she didn't have 10. She didn't have 10 torpedo tubes. She had 4.
And you said, is this what the other side would have looked like before the technology was changed out?
Well, the top 2, yes, that would have been there.
Okay.
Which are now missing there.
Yes.
But then they don't have the ones down below.
They don't. Okay, gotcha.
So the ones in the forward section would be these 2, and then 2 down below, where they would have removed those.
Gotcha.
Because now you're getting, you know, the sub is getting more narrow and coming to a point in the back, so you can have 6, right? Because that just makes it larger. Mm-hmm. But again, 15 guys would have lived down here, and then with a total of 8 torpedo tubes, 4 always in the tubes, and 4 right here, and then the guys just smattered around it.
And what was something like refueling or getting more food, supplies, that kind of thing? And what was that like for a submarine, especially thinking about like the how massive the Pacific is, hunting down Japanese shipping? What was the logistics like there?
Yeah, they could be resupplied at sea. God knows most of the guys would jump in during. They'd have a swim call, and that's how they'd get clean. They wouldn't bother taking a shower here for 25 seconds, right? So they would just jump in the Pacific, because again, they might surface and there's nothing for 100 miles. Mm-hmm. So they would have the time to do that. Resupplying would be from a supply ship if they were on patrol. A lot of times they might not be able to be, because then that would give them away, especially if they're forward moving and into enemy waters, like great enemy waters. But they carried food everywhere. The shower was packed for, you know, of food for 2 weeks. So you couldn't even shower for 2 weeks, right? There would be food all over the place, stowed. And then had to be very independent. So that's one of the things about qualifying on a submarine. And guys who do are very proud of that. And they get to wear their dolphins, it's called. They can have their dolphin pin. Because it's a finite number of men isolated on your own, potentially for a couple of weeks at least at a time, you would need to know, or they wanted you to know, most of the systems in some rudimentary or minor technical way. And so to become qualified and to earn your dolphins is you know a lot about each system on board. If there was a plane overhead and you had to dive and you had to do emergency dive, you got to get down to 65 feet in 60 seconds. All the watertight doors that we came through had to be sealed within 10 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds. If you're hanging out here playing cards, but you're an engineman, you're now stuck here because the door's shut. So you better know how to work the torpedoes. And so that's where the qualifying, earning your dolphins comes from. Because you might get trapped in a space and you have to be a valuable member. You can't just be sitting there while everyone else is working, right? So you had to know enough to be able to be given an order and to at least know what to do. And so that's when you have 200 guys on the USS Little Rock all doing the same thing, you don't need to worry about that, right? Because there's 200 guys doing the same thing. Here, there's 10. And if you get caught playing cards, you better know what to do. Same with the torpedo man if he's hanging in an engine room or talking to a friend. Or the radio man is back here. You need to know how to do that. And if a torpedo man, need to know how to use the radio and to take messages.
Sure, yeah. So they had to be very multi-talented and
Yes.
be able to move between areas really easily.
And that's why they're proud of their dolphins when they get them and they qualify. And this boat was a very good qualifying boat. A lot of guys would come on, not qualified, and then during their mission, they would get qualified. And then they can move on to another boat or stay here. So, and then to kind of wrap it up, I have guys that came back. They said, "Oh, you served on Croaker? Let's go see it." I'm never going back on Croaker again. I'll see the Sullivans, I'll see the Little Rock, but forget the Croaker. You know, so not everyone has a misty memory of their time on board. And, you know, some people loved it, some people didn't like it so much.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear about all the, again, because you have multiple ships in the collection, just the various experiences of the men who served on board are also just really interesting.
Yeah, it's a fascinating window and insight, and I'm so proud that I can do this sort of work and be the person that can catalog all this stuff, and to make sure those stories are saved and to be told by future generations, that's what it's all about. Because again, at some point, every veteran who served aboard these vessels will be gone, and now it changes the narrative of how do we tell stories to people that have no idea about it, not even family at some point, right? Mm-hmm. Family can be told stories for 25 years. They're eventually going to pass away as well. And so now there will be zero connection. So we have to make the connection here for the visitor.
So this is a great spot to end the tour, where you can see we came to the other end of the submarine. You also got great views of the other ships in the collection here. So it's a really good reminder that if you come here to the Buffalo Naval Park, you can visit all 3 of these and just really a whole day experience if you really take the time to go through them and appreciate all the different areas on board.
Very true. And thank you, Joshua and John, for coming here and bringing your channel and your subscribers to maybe something they haven't seen before. It's really appreciated, and I love the collaboration.
Absolutely. So before we end here, if you want to remind people who do want to visit or just kind of learn more about you online, where are you most active online? Where can they check you out?
Yeah, that's great. So we do have a website, buffalonavalpark.org. Our YouTube channel, I have about 590 videos or so on board. You can just go to YouTube, search Buffalo Naval Park. Also with Facebook and Instagram as well. Just Buffalo Naval Park as a handle.
Fantastic. And we'll make sure to have a link in the description of this video to the website, so you can just click that link, find all the information online, and highly recommend coming here and visiting in person, exploring all of these ships on your own. A really, really incredible experience here in Buffalo. Thank you so much, Shane. Keep up the great work.
Welcome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joshua.